Good afternoon in New York and Eastern North America. Good morning, Middle and the United States Western parts. Good evening in Europe, Israel, Middle East, and Africa. And welcome, whatever time of day or night, for all of you who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for MultiGenerational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining today's webinar. This International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma webinar is held in observance of the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust, January 27. This unique International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma webinar will be fully dedicated to a presentation and open dialogue with Menachem Rosensaft. Born in Bergen-Belsen Displaced Persons Camp to two survivors of the Nazi death and concentration camp of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, Menachem has devoted much of his own life to agonizing and reflecting upon his family's, people's, and humanity's Holocaust legacies and their meanings to current and future generations. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. Having devoted the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s, I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impact of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. I conceive of psychohistory as we live history in the now, not as a list of past dates, events, and numbers, but as it shapes our decisions and ways of being today. As mentioned, today's speaker, Menachem Rosensaft, is an adjunct professor of law at Cornell Law School, lecturer in law at Columbia Law School, and General Counsel Emeritus of the World Jewish Congress. The son of two survivors of the Nazi Holocaust and concentration camps of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, he is the founding chairman of the International Network of Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors, and the author most recently of Burning Psalms, Confronting Adonai After Auschwitz, by Yehuda Press. Within an hour after the conclusion of the webinar, you will receive its recording. We have an hour and a half for our meeting, though we have been known for a most engaged audience who keeps us longer. Following a 35-minute presentation, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience. I will then invite Menachem to conclude today's webinar with his, quotes, last words. Please use the Q&A or chat functions, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions and brief comments as we can. I now have the honor of welcoming Menachem Rosensaft. Menachem, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Yael, Dr. Danieli. It's a privilege to be here with you, especially this week, the week of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. 81 years ago, on January 27th, 1945, soldiers and officers of the Soviet Union's Red Army liberated approximately 7,000 prisoners, most of them Jews, who had been left behind in the Nazi death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau in what had been German-occupied Poland. These victims of Hitler's final solution of the Jewish question were deemed too weak, too ill to be taken on death marches and transported to camps in Germany as the Nazi troops retreated from Poland. Among the liberated survivors of Auschwitz that day was Regina Grimberg, a French Jew. It is impossible to describe in human words the meeting of the imprisoned, saved from certain death, with their liberators, she recalled. Soviet officers and soldiers in rags, exhausted, freezing cold but victorious, cried like little children at the sight of piles of corpses in front of barracks and people in agony, resembling skeletons stacked on bunks. The female prisoners screamed, sobbed, and lovingly touched the clothes of their liberators to find out that these people were real and kissed their hands, end quote. On that same date, 81 years ago, my mother was an inmate at the Nazi concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen in northern Germany. She had been brought there in November 1944 after spending 15 months in Birkenau. My father, meanwhile, was either at Langensalza, a subcamp of the Buchenwald concentration camp in Thuringia in central Germany, or at another concentration camp, Dora Mittelbau, where the V-2 rockets were manufactured. He had been deported to Langensalza from Auschwitz on December 2nd, 1944, and was sent from there to Dora sometime in late January or early February. For my parents, liberation was still months away. Fast forward 1 year to January 28, 1946. A young Jewish French woman, Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier, testified at the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. She had been arrested by the French police in February 1942, and after being imprisoned in France for close to a year, was deported to Auschwitz, where she arrived at dawn on January 27, 1943, 83 years ago. The seals on our cars were broken, she told the tribunal, and we were driven out by blows with the butt end of a rifle and taken to the Birkenau camp, a section of the Auschwitz camp. As we passed through the door, we knew only too well how slender our chances were that we would come out again, for we had already met columns of living skeletons going to work. And as we entered, we sang the Marseillaise to keep up our courage. Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier then described in harrowing detail what she had seen and experienced at Auschwitz. Perhaps the most gruesome part of her testimony was the following, and I'm quoting. At Auschwitz, there were 8 crematories, but as from 1944, these proved insufficient. The SS had large pits dug by the internees, where they put branches sprinkled with gasoline, which they set on fire. There they threw the corpses into the pits. One night we were awakened by terrifying cries, and we discovered on the following day that on the preceding day, the gas supply having run out, they had thrown the children into the furnaces alive. I begin today with these snapshots from 80, 81, and 83 years ago because they remind us that Holocaust memory consists of hundreds of thousands of such snapshots, forcing us to focus on individual experiences, on individual agonies and anguishes, rather than on impersonal narratives and statistics. In due course, both my parents were liberated at Bergen-Belsen. When British troops entered that camp on April 15, 1945, they encountered a devastation of humanity for which they were utterly unprepared. More than 10,000 corpses lay scattered about the camp, and some 58,000 surviving inmates were suffering from a combination of typhus, tuberculosis, dysentery, extreme malnutrition, and a host of other virulent diseases. The hand of Adonai came upon me, declared the prophet Ezekiel. He took me out by the Spirit of Adonai and set me down in the valley. It was full of bones. He led me all around them. There were very many of them spread over the valley, and they were very dry. He said to me, Son of man, can these bones live again? And I replied, O Lord Adonai, only you know. And he said to me, prophesy over these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the words of Adonai. Thus said the Lord Adonai to these bones, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live again. In a lecture describing condition at Bergen-Belsen when the camp was liberated, Lieutenant Colonel M.W. Gonin, the British officer who commanded the 11th Light Field Ambulance during the camp's liberation, said that there were, and I'm quoting, at least 20,000 sick suffering from the most virulent diseases known to man, all of whom required urgent hospital treatment, and 30,000 men and women who might die if they were not treated, but who certainly would die if they were not fed and removed from the horror camp. What we had not got was nurses, doctors, beds, bedding, clothes, drugs, dressings, thermometers, bedpans, or any of the essentials of medical treatment, and worst of all, no common language. The liberators urgently needed help to cope with the enormity of the humanitarian task that confronted them. Brigadier H.L. Glyn Hughes, the Deputy Director of Medical Services of the British Army of the Rhine and one of the first British officers to enter Belsen, appointed my mother, a not yet 33-year-old dental surgeon from Poland who had studied medicine in France before the war, to organize and head a group of doctors and nurses among the survivors to help care for the camp's thousands of critically ill inmates. For weeks on end, she and her team of 28 doctors and 620 other female and male volunteers, only a few of whom were trained nurses, worked round the clock with the British military medical personnel to try to save as many of the survivors as possible. Despite their desperate efforts, it was not until May 11, 1945, that the daily death rate fell below 100. The Holocaust claimed 13,944 additional victims at Bergen-Belsen during the 2 months following the liberation. Ezekiel continued, and he said to me, O son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up, our hope is gone, we are doomed. Prophesy, therefore, and say to them, thus said the Lord Adonai, I am going to open your grave and lift you out of the grave, O my people, and bring you to the land of Israel. I will put my breath into you, and you shall live again, and I will set you upon your own soil. 36 years later, my mother recalled the grim reality of her first days of precarious, surreal freedom. For the greater part of the liberated Jews of Bergen-Belsen, she said, there was no ecstasy, no joy at our liberation. We had lost our families, our homes. We had no place to go, nobody to hug. Nobody was waiting for us anywhere. We had been liberated from the fear of death, but we were not free from the fear of life. By the time she was liberated at Belsen, my mother had experienced several lifetimes worth of suffering and horrors. Upon her arrival at Auschwitz-Birkenau on the night of August 3rd to 4th, 1943, her parents, her first husband, and her 5.5-year-old son, Benjamin, my brother, were sent directly into one of the camp's gas chambers, where they were murdered. Man, wrote Jean-Paul Sartre, is not only that which he conceives himself to be, but that which he wills himself to be. A human being, he went on, is nothing other than his own project. He exists only to the extent that he realizes himself. Therefore, he is nothing more than the sum of his actions, nothing more than his life. Devastated by the loss of her family, my mother, like most of her fellow inmates and as the Germans intended, felt utterly disoriented, humiliated, and deprived of her sense of self. She was forced to wear prison clothes, her head was shaved, and her name was replaced with the number 52406 tattooed on her arm. I always felt humiliated and ashamed, she wrote in her memoirs. I hated sleeping in my clothes. I was ashamed to admit that I was hungry. I was ashamed to go to the bathroom and to be exposed half naked in front of so many other women. I was ashamed of the way I looked. I seldom spoke. But then a cathartic, almost surreal event occurred. One morning after the roll call, a torrential rain came down, she recalled. We wanted to return to the barracks, but instead were forced by the SS women to sit there for hours. As the rain fell down over our bodies, I realized that we were utterly helpless. Tears came to my eyes, the first ones since my arrival. When they mixed with the rain and I sat there sobbing, I found myself again. Because of her medical training, the notorious Joseph Mengele, Birkenau's chief medical officer, assigned my mother in October 1943 to work as a doctor in the camp's infirmary. There, she was able to save the lives of fellow inmates by performing rudimentary surgeries for them, camouflaging their wounds, and sending them out of the barracks on work detail in advance of selections. In November 1944, Mengele sent my mother and 8 other Jewish inmates of Birkenau as a medical team to Bergen-Belsen. Again, the human potential for good in the face of evil manifested itself. Beginning in December 1944 with 49 Dutch Jewish children whose parents had been sent away to other camps, my mother organized what became known as a Kinderheim, a children's home within the concentration camp. Helalos Yaffe, another prisoner at Bergen-Belsen, subsequently remembered how my mother, then Dr. Hadassah or Ada Bimko, quote, walked from block to block, found the children, took them, lived with them, and took care of them. Among them were children from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and elsewhere. Some had been brought to Belsen from Buchenwald, others from Theresienstadt. Together with a group of other women inmates, my mother kept 149 Jewish children alive at Bergen-Belsen throughout the bitter winter and early spring of 1945. According to Hela Yaffe, and again I'm quoting, the children were very small and sick, and we had to wash them, clothe them, calm them, and feed them. Most of them were sick with terrible indigestion, dysentery, and diarrhea, and just lay on the bunks. There was little food, but somehow Ada managed to get some special food and white bread from the Germans. Later, there was typhus. She went on. Ada was the one who could get injections, chocolate, pills, and vitamin. I don't know how she did it. Although most of the children were sick, thanks to Ada, nearly all of them survived. Where my mother found the strength to save others rather than focusing on her own survival has always been a profound mystery to me. Perhaps her devotion to the children at Belsen, and then in the weeks following the liberation to the camp's thousands of critically ill survivors, was her way of coping with her inability to protect her own child. In the middle of winter, observed Albert Camus, I found out at last that there was within me an invincible summer. The liberation of the camp was a critical linchpin in the continuum of history in that it ensured that Holocaust memory, the memories the survivors brought with them out of the inferno, would not be itself destroyed. This survival of Holocaust memory imposes on us today the responsibility to make sure that this memory does not fade, will not be allowed to fade. One significant part of our responsibility to the past is the urgent need to integrate that memory that has been transferred to us by the survivors into the collective consciousness of the Jewish people and of humankind, not as abstract historical statistics, but as a metamorphosizing event that defines us and that must continue to define us in the future. I speak as a son of two survivors of Auschwitz-Bergen-Belsen. Together with the vast majority of children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, I relate to the Holocaust not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually by personalizing it through the stories and memories, and yes, the anguish that has been transmitted to us by our parents and grandparents. Remembrance for the sake of remembrance is important, but I suggest to you it is not anywhere near enough. We must do more, much more, than passively relate to our collective awareness of the Holocaust and its horrors. And I firmly believe that one critical way for us to do so, perhaps the most important and most impactful, is by integrating an abiding awareness of the Holocaust into our liturgy. Jewish liturgy, to be sure, but also Christian liturgy and the liturgy of other faiths. The biblical exodus from Egypt is said to have occurred, if it occurred at all, in the 13th century before the Common Era. Almost a millennium and a half later, the drafters of the Mishnah, the first written compilation of the Jewish oral law, mandated in their discussion of the laws relating to Passover that in each and every generation a person must view themselves as though they had personally come out of Egypt. Indeed, that is one of the central and most meaningful passages we recite at the Passover Seder. Thus, the Jewish people's emergence into freedom against the backdrop of Egyptian slavery looms as a formative event of both Judaism as a religion and the Jewish national identity. However, the exodus from Egypt was not the only watershed moment in Jewish history. Talmudist and Auschwitz survivor Professor David Weiss Halivni wrote, and again I quote, "There were two major theological events in Jewish history, revelation at Sinai and revelation at Auschwitz. At Sinai, God appeared before Israel, addressed us, and gave us instructions. At Auschwitz, God absented himself, abandoned us, and handed us over to the enemy." 81 years after the end of the Holocaust, it is incumbent on those of us who consider ourselves religiously observant Jews, whether Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, or Renewal, to ask ourselves, not for the first time, the question that risks shattering our faith in and our relationship with God. How do we reconcile? How can we reconcile the brutal, systematic genocide of millions of Jews with the concept of an omniscient, omnipotent, protective God whom we constantly praise and thank in our liturgy for performing miracles on behalf of the Jewish people in biblical times? And, I hasten to add, this is a question that adherents to other religions, other faiths, must ask themselves as well. How can we praise God for saving the Israelites fleeing Egypt by parting the waters for them, when we know that the same God did not rescue some 6 million Jews from annihilation at the hand of Nazi Germany and its accomplices? While God's self-revelation at Sinai formed the bedrock of Jewish theology and liturgy, the absence of the divine manifestation Weiss Halivni called revelation at Auschwitz, and the related theological significance and implications of this cataclysmic event have been and are absent from our ongoing theological interactions with God. Aside from Yom HaShoah, the day set aside on the Jewish calendar for commemorating the genocide of European Jewry, or perhaps the martyrology on Yom Kippur, the mass murder of 6 million Jewish women, men, and children and infants is not featured even obliquely in our formal religious services. These services across the denominations are replete with psalms that extol God's omniscience and loving kindness. These biblical psalms are simultaneously a recognition of the wonders God performed in biblical times and an acknowledgement of the comparative moral weakness of human beings who can only strive to approach God's righteousness, loving kindness, and mercy. They became an integral part of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, more than 2,500 years ago. The biblical Psalms also became a staple of Christian liturgy and, as the Zabur, are part of the Islamic religious tradition as well. Again and again, we are told that God, Adonai, is and always has been merciful and compassionate. That Adonai is our rock, our fortress, our redeemer, our shield against evil and evildoers. And yet we know that no such divine intervention, no such divine assistance was forthcoming, that no divine loving kindness or mercy manifested itself at Auschwitz or Treblinka, at Majdanek, Babi Yar, Ponari, or Bergen-Belsen. As we read the biblical psalm, we are meant to be comforted by them, to feel close to God. But in the aftermath of the Holocaust, we do not read them on our own. Hovering over us, with us, are ghosts who force us to reconsider any notions of consolation, God's protection, or a divine embrace. It is against this backdrop that I wrote my book, Burning Psalms, Confronting Adonai After Auschwitz, to which Dr. Danieli referred. I did not write the Psalms in that book to seek answers to the unanswerable. On the contrary, I tried to bring the fundamental theological enigma represented by the Holocaust squarely into the Jewish liturgy by invoking the ghosts who haunt us, the ghosts of Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Bergen-Belsen, and giving them a place and a voice in our ongoing dialogue with God. I wrote my burning psalm as a Jew who believes, or wants to believe, in God, but who has been unable to harmonize intellectually or spiritually the palpable absence of God during the Shoah with the essence of God, of Adonai, as portrayed in the biblical Psalms. My burning psalms are meant to give the ghosts of Auschwitz and Belsen, the ghosts of the Holocaust, a central role in Jewish liturgy, not as shadowy intruders into our consciousness, but as vocal center stage protagonists. By attempting to reimagine the biblical psalm in their voices, I knew full well that I was treading into a perilous unknown. But I have no doubt whatsoever that in order to continue our interaction with Adonai, we must confront Adonai with these voices in our dialogue with the divine. And perhaps, just perhaps, Jews praying to Adonai, or Christians praying to their God, or Muslims praying to Allah, will begin to hear these voices as well. I also wrote these psalms because we do not have the luxury of time. We cannot rely on future generations to carve out space for Holocaust memory as a core element of our national and religious Jewish identity. We who have listened to and absorbed the memories of the survivors must take on this task. In doing so, we must think of the annihilated millions not as impersonal statistics, but as individuals with names, faces, identities, dreams, and emotions. We cannot allow the Jewish women, children, and men who died of starvation in ghetto streets, or of typhus in a concentration camp barrack, or whose corpses rose toward heaven from a crematorium, to fade into the ether of oblivion. None of us can presume to know God's essence or God's countenance. If, however, we wish to continue to interact with God, with Adonai, after Auschwitz, as Avinu Malkeinu, our parent and sovereign, in the same way we did before Auschwitz, then we have not just the right, but the obligation to bring the ghosts of Auschwitz into our dialogue with Adonai. The question that pervades each of my burning psalms is the one that cannot have a satisfactory answer. Namely, how can we praise God for saving the Israelites fleeing Egypt by parting the waters for them, when we know that the same God did not rescue some 6 million Jews from annihilation at the hand of Nazi Germany and its accomplices? How can we justify praising and thanking God throughout our liturgy for performing miracles in biblical time, while studiously ignoring the reality that no such divine miracles were forthcoming during the Shoah? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the foremost Jewish philosophers of the 20th century, credited the Kotzker Rebbe, a Hasidic master, with a notion that, and I quote, the true worship of God was not in finding the truth, but rather in an honest search for it. If so, are we not forced to ask ourselves how we are able to continue to pray to God after Auschwitz, as if Auschwitz had never happened? No hallelujah for me after Auschwitz, declaimed the narrator of my burning Psalm 106. I cannot give thanks to you, Adonai, for goodness you withheld at Majdanek, for loving kindness you did not show at Ponari, for mighty deed you did not perform at Babi Yar. Why do I care that you once split the sea, made the water stand, drew water from a rock, asked burning Psalm 78 of Adonai, if you did not take my grandparents, did not take my brother, out of the Birkenau death chamber? The Holocaust challenged and shattered many of the previously accepted norms of human existence, including our Jewish religious norms. While we have no problem allocating blame and responsibility for the Holocaust to its mortal perpetrators, we have, simply put, let Adonai, the God we pray to, off the hook. The biblical Psalm 120 asks Adonai to save my soul from false lips, from a deceitful tongue, before concluding with a sense of relief that, for a long time my soul dwelled with those who hate peace. I am at peace. In contrast, burning Psalm 120 takes us into the depths of the Shoah. Cursing lips, malignant tongues, pernicious words were only the beginning. I was shot at Ponari, inhaled Zyklon B at Birkenau, carbon monoxide at Treblinka. Typhus raged my soul in Belsen barracks, and I am not at peace in the grave. Writing in early 1944, while the gas chambers at Auschwitz-Birkenau were operating in full force, Abraham Joshua Heschel asked the most basic and most critical of all theological questions. And I quote, The day of the Lord is a day without the Lord. Where is God? Why dost thou not halt the trains loaded with Jews being led to slaughter? End quote. This question, which was asked in one form or other by Jews in the ghettos and camps of the Holocaust, is studiously avoided in post-Holocaust Jewish religious services. It is also the very question that must, in my opinion, be transposed into precisely those services. My father was once asked if he still believed in God after surviving numerous Nazi German deaths in concentration camps. I do not hold the Ribbono Shel Olam, the master of the universe, responsible for the Holocaust, he replied. But I won't give him any medals for it either. I believe Ani Ma'amin with perfect faith, Be'emunah Shlema, in the coming of the Messiah, is the 12th of Maimonides' 13 principles of faith. But how can we reconcile such absolute trust with the failure of the Messiah, any Messiah, to appear at the nadir of Jewish history? The Yiddish poet Shmerke Kaczergiński, a survivor of the Vilna Ghetto, enunciated this fundamental spiritual and theological quandary in his song, Soll schon kommen die Gole, Let the Redemption Come Already, when he pleaded with the Tatele in Himmel, the Father in heaven, that the Messiah, Mashiach, shouldn't arrive on the scene a bissele zu spät, a little too late. Burning Psalm 22. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, Adonai, compassionate and gracious God. Ani Ma'amin be'emunah shlema beviat HaMashiach. I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. Eli, Eli, lama azaftani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Children, 1.5 million children, each the son, the daughter of Adonai, each a Shabbat candle brutally extinguished, each betrayed, abandoned by a Savior who refused to come, whom you did not send. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum, compassionate God. Ani Ma'amin be'emunah shlema. I believe with perfect faith. Lama azaftani. Why have you forsaken me? And then we remember that according to the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, the last words uttered by Jesus as he was being murdered on the cross, albeit in Aramaic rather than in Hebrew, was this precise phrase from the biblical Psalm 22, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? It is a reminder that the anguish at being abandoned by God is not a new phenomenon, and that it is by no means limited to or novel in the Jewish experience during the Holocaust. But this awareness also forces us to reflect on the fact that Jesus, who was a Jew, and his apostles and disciples, who are also all Jews, would have been persecuted and murdered as Jews during the years of the Holocaust by men and women who were Christians, or at a minimum were born Christians. In burning Psalm 18, in what may well be the ultimate manifestation of chutzpah, I have tried to place myself in the mindset of my brother in a Birkenau gas chamber, and to address Adonai, to question Adonai, mima'amakim, from the depths. Burning Psalm 18. Benjamin Prezorovich, my mother's son, was 5 years and 8 months old when he was murdered in a gas chamber at Auschwitz-Birkenau on the night of August 3rd to 4th, 1943. A song from the dead, for the shadow, fading reflection of Benjamin, who spoke these words to Adonai on the day that Adonai did not save him from the hand of all his enemies. And he said, I once loved you, Adonai. I believed, I was taught you were my strength, my rock, my fortress, where I would be safe, my salvation. Adonai, Adonai, I believed, I was taught you are compassionate, abounding in loving kindness and faithfulness. In my distress, I called to you, Adonai, but the ground did not tremble. The world's foundation remained unshaken. You did not roar, did not even whisper. You did not bend the heavens, did not come down from your palace to lift me out of the suffocation. What did I ever do to deserve your silence, your indifference? Was David who seduced Bathsheba, who sent Uriah to his death, whom you did not allow to build your temple, more faithful than I, more righteous, more blameless? And yet you rescued David from his enemies, but left me gasping for air, gas filling my lungs on a cold cement floor, as the cords of death choked me, overwhelmed me, dragged me to your shoal. No, Adonai, you did not protect me with your shield. Your right hand did not sustain me. You did not set me free, did not hold me, cradle me, comfort me. Therefore, you will not light up my eyes or revive my heart, not even with a rainbow, and I will not sing to you again. What we have to realize is that poetry, dreams, parables, songs are all critical parts of the memory that we need to move forward. We can't simply exist with a backdrop of history without understanding that the nightmares of the years of the Shoah, the years of the Holocaust, have been transferred to us as well. Burning Psalm 42, for Adonai an elegy from the depths. No deer run free through Birkenau, no streams of clear water, no distractions to take away the certainty that tomorrow is an illusion. I stopped yearning for you long ago, Adonai, when I heard a German scoff, "Where is your God?" He was right. You are not here. You were never here. Now all I want to know is, do you know I am here? We are here. Do you ever look down, even for an instant, and see me, see us here? Have your tears ever become your bread? These things I will remember, how I walked slowly, oh so slowly, among weeping thousands into a sepulchre of the doomed, deafened by screams for help, for mercy, for you, Adonai, until the gates closed behind me, not the gates of heaven, the gates of the righteous that you did not open, but the gates of death. Avinu Malkeinu, here you are not king, you were never king, you never will be king. Here the oppressors are king, their voices, their curses unmuzzled. Avinu Malkeinu, they wear warm uniform, we wear torn rag. They eat hot meals, we receive turnip soup, stale bread. They sleep in bed, we lie on filthy, lice-infested straw in leaky wooden barracks. Avinu Malkeinu, because we are your people, we have been inscribed and sealed in the book of death. Avinu Malkeinu, disease, fear, whips, hunger, slavery, asphyxiating gas engulf us, destroy us, before we became dust, ashes. Avinu Malkeinu, you did not hear our voices, you did not favor us, you did not spare us, you were not righteous to us, you did not treat us with compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, you did not save us. And so, my friends, let us bear in mind that nothing, absolutely nothing, about Auschwitz, about Birkenau, about the Holocaust for that matter, was logical or made sense in a historical sense, in a theological sense, in an emotional sense. Auschwitz, Elie Wiesel once wrote, signifies not only the failure of 2,000 years of Christian civilization, but also the defeat of the intellect that wants to find a meaning with a capital M in history. What Auschwitz embodied had none. Thus, the only thing we can do is not to try to understand, but to remember and to integrate that remembrance into our collective consciousness. And so allow me please to conclude with burning Psalm 148. Your angels may want to acclaim you, Adonai. Kings and princes, rabbis and priests, imams and patriarchs may want to magnify your name. But the goats of Auschwitz remind us that you must not be praised from the heavens, that your name should not be exalted on high. The earth and ocean, the mountains and all the hills, fruit trees and all the cedars are your splendor. But the goats of Auschwitz remind us that they haunt your eternity. The animals and birds remind us of the freedom brutally torn away from your people. The heavens and the waters above the heavens remind us of your vast universe that could have been but never became a sanctuary. Snow and hail remind us that the children of Israel were forced to stand for hours outside their barracks in the freezing cold day after day during winter roll calls. The sun and moon remind us that you looked on in silence as millions were slaughtered. The stars of light blanketing the sky remind us of the 1.5 million Jewish children whose lights were extinguished. Stormy winds raging into the night remind us of no longer breathable air in Zyklon B chambers. Fire and smoke remind us of crematory flames, consuming flesh and bones, leaving behind only ashes. The goats of Auschwitz remind us that you did not keep your faithful close to you, that they were left to die alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Menachem. I don't know how others in the audience feel, but this admirable presentation leaves so much for us to feel, to learn, to study further. I knew your mother. This is her book. And mother admired her, and it was impossible not to love her.
Thank you.
And boy, the little I know, she would be so proud.
Thank you. Thank you.
I told you personally, but I want to share with everyone that when I first read the book, I, of course, immediately took my Bible and my father's prayer book and told Manny I became so entrenched in it that I probably could give a lecture on what you, or many lectures on what you have challenged us with today.
Thank you.
And It's amazing how you integrated all of you in this, in the sense of your poetry, your history, your lawyering. After all, you are lawyering with God. So I don't have really questions. I did have two. You mentioned the urgency of time, and I wanted to, and I was curious. Have you started? Have you started working on the sounds before October 7,
Oh yes.
2023?
Oh yes. It took me about a year and a half to write, and I I was not completely finished, but I'd written pretty much all of it before October 7th. I was still in the editing process, and then it was during the months after October 7th that we decided to publish, and I was fortunate to find a publisher of Jewish books, Yehuda Press, which which is really where I wanted the book to be. I very much wanted it to be within a mainstream Jewish framework.
But as I saw immediately in the book, the Pope, you visited the Pope with a book, and you're not sitting in the same background that I knew before with you, with the picture of the Pope, with your book. Can you please share with the audience what that was about?
Well, I didn't visit him at that point, but I had had an interaction, interestingly enough, via email with the Pope after I delivered a guest lecture, I think it was in 2013 at my synagogue at Park Avenue Synagogue, about faith and about religious belief after the Holocaust, and my way of reconciling God and belief in God. Bear in mind, as an aside, there's a difference between liturgy and theology. And theology is how do we come to terms with God? And for me, it is a belief that there was a divine presence, what is a divine spark, what is called in Jewish mysticism, the Shekhinah. There was that divine spark in the camps and in the ghettos, and it was present in every Jew who risked their lives to save another Jew or help another Jew or just comfort another Jew, who shared a piece of bread with someone who was hungrier, who comforted a child on the way into the gas chambers, who told a joke in a barrack in order to ease someone else's anguish. And that same Shekhinah was present in every non-Jew who risked their lives to help or save or rescue a Jew. And that Shekhinah was absent from the perpetrator. It was absent from those who looked on. And that was my way of reconciling it. This lecture was published. Someone sent it to Pope Francis, and I received a beautiful email in which he expressed his agreement with my conclusion. Well, fast forward to when my book was published at the beginning of last year. and I did not have I had met the Pope in the interim, but the book was given.
Still Pope Francis.
Still Pope Francis.
Okay.
This is all Pope Francis, and the book was sent to him and given to him. And I have this enormous gift of a photograph of Pope Francis reading my book.
Yes, I saw it, but is it possible for you to show it to the audience?
Well, I don't have it right here, but
Okay. Okay. Let me move on to the audience, to audience comments and questions. And if you already had everyone had the opportunity to take some deep breaths, come on, join the conversation. So let me just share with everybody of course, Erica Rao immediately said what I wanted to say. Wow, I don't know what to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. And Judy Barat wrote, Mr. Rosensaft, my daughter, Randy Barat, speaks so highly of you. And now I understand why. It was lovely to see and hear the man she so admires. Okay.
Let me just interrupt you that Randy Barat lived in Berlin, and she is a docent and guide at the Jewish Museum in Berlin, and she is absolutely superb. If anyone goes to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, they should definitely ask to be taken through the museum by Randy. It is a unique experience.
Oh, so she's in Berlin institution.
Yes.
So I was there, I'm sure, before she was a docent there. So I was there at the opening. So
yes.
thank you. Thank you, Judy. And Lana Schreier, a third generation, who is making a film on the third generation, writes, what an incredibly moving story, and Menachem is a wonderful speaker. Thank you, Lana.
Thank
I
you.
agree. Erica Rao again, very powerful, very inspiring. Thank you for trusting us with your story and your families. Thank you, Erica. And Lana, again, to everyone. My Oma, Ilse Loeb, spoke so highly of Menachem, and I can definitely see why. Menachem, you have whole families.
I'm very humbled by that, and very appreciative by these kind words.
Wonderful. And Lana, I know that your mother is here too, so maybe she can also speak. Those of you who want to speak, let us know, so I will put you on speaker, okay? Okay, Sarah Winkowski writes, thank you, Menachem, for opening our eyes for many things we had never really thought about. Thank you for this brilliant exposition of facts.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. And Judy Renee, my wonderful Judy Renee, sending love and gratitude to Yael and Menachem. Zachor Anti-Semitism Initiative, Orange County, New York. That's where Judy is. And child of survivors of the Shoah, I have added the painful challenge of the massacre of October 7, 2023 in Israel to heartbreaking meaninglessness. Thank you, Judy. Erica Rao again. Erica, I'll have to put you on because you're part of the ongoing conversation. And very importantly, Menachem, this is, okay, as a woman of faith, I have found myself writing poetry akin to Psalms to process my incomparable trauma. Hearing your poetry is so powerful. I have two questions. Erica, I'm very glad you are a woman of faith. Frankly, I felt a little guilty to not bring a person of faith against Menachem, but I didn't. Frankly, also, I really wanted just to have the room for him first. Erica, Robbie, can you put Erica on to ask her questions, please? Erica, you are on. Please go ahead.
It is so nice to talk to you. Sorry I don't have my camera on. First off, I am just in awe of your writing. And when I say person of faith, I don't mean to be coming from like a rebuttal sort of place.
It's okay to rebuttal here too, Erica. Go ahead.
And it's not because I mean I I'm trying to find the words. There are reasons for I think anyone of faith to question, you know, where were you? Like, why, what did I do to deserve this? So to hear, to hear you talk about, your Psalms and your questions is so powerful because it rings so true to so, something that obviously we can't relate to, but that is so extreme. Like, why do bad things happen to me? The things that happen to me don't even compare. To make sense of it in a religious, spiritual way, it's just making sense of it through poetry. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's important that we create space to in any kind of writing or conversation to allow ourselves to confront those questions because I know, at least for me growing up, there was a lot of discouraging for some reason to, faith is like have faith like a child, it's just everything happens for a reason. And it's like, well, um, sometimes I have a really hard time finding those reasons. That's just me, but and all this is, just trying, just hearing that, but then going into a field like genocide and then hearing, like people such as yourself share, the emotional, like you can, read about the facts and the timelines, but the emotions, all of it, it's having space to really t talk about that is, I, do you, what are your thoughts on, if you don't mind me asking, if like what that's looked like for you in terms of being like a helpful tool, art being expressive and again, this is just as a woman, this is like I have I have I'm not here to say, well, you shouldn't be questioning it. No, because that's not at all where I'm coming from because
Well,
this is
thank you. Thank you very much for your look. I think that everyone has to come to terms with
yeah.
their own way of dealing both with the past and of dealing with God, religion, faith. This is very personal. But what we also have to remember is that history did not end in 1945. History did not end with the liberation. Uh, Human beings did not become better necessarily. Evil remains. Genocides have happened since. And what I'd like to do is, it in my book, in a coda, but it is not one of the Psalms. But I felt it important to include because it's something. I wrote this in the spring of 2024, so about, I would say, 6 months after October 7th. But while the war, the Israel-Hamas war, was still raging. And I think it's relevant to our discussion and our remembrance today. And it's a poem called The Child. And it's as follows. Murdered children, emaciated children must awaken us before it is too late to who we are, to why we are. The starving child in the Warsaw Ghetto, Białystok Ghetto, Będzin Ghetto was created in the same divine image by the same God, the same Adonai, the same Allah, as the starving child in Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Rafah. The dead child in Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Rafah, is cried over with the same tears by the same God, the same Allah, the same Adonai, as the dead child in Kfar Aza, Nahal Oz, Be'eri. The child, Israeli child, Palestinian child, Jewish child, Muslim child, is innocent, always was, always will be innocent. And it is for the not yet dead child, Palestinian child, Israeli child, Muslim child, Jewish child, that the killing must end, the war must end, the terror must end, the hatred must end. We cannot erase the horrors of October 7th. We cannot erase the images of shrouded infants in the rubble of bombed hospitals. But despite unending anguish, Adonai's anguish, Allah's anguish, our anguish, Israelis and Palestinians, Muslims and Jews must now look into the sunrise to create a beginning of hope, however elusive, if not for themselves, if not for ourselves, then for the child, the Israeli child, the Palestinian child, the Jewish child, the Muslim child. We must, I believe, bring our memory, bring Holocaust memory, the memory that we have received from the survivors, the memory that we see recorded in diaries that were found from those who didn't survive. We must bring that to bear to make at least the attempt to ease the suffering of others. It cannot be a kind of, it cannot become a weapon that is only meant as an armor for ourselves. It has to become a blanket, if you will, that we can cover over all who are suffering. And I don't mean to make comparisons. I'm not making analogies. But let's remember something. From the perspective of the victim, it really doesn't matter how and why they are being victimized. All they know is that they may be about to die, that they are suffering. And whatever you can say, the children involved on all sides bear no guilt, bear no responsibility. And if we don't, you do it for anybody else. We must at least do it so that they can grow up and maybe at some point in a different atmospheric.
Thank you, Menachem, for the thoughtful answer. We could have a full other webinar if we remember that if we bitterly remember that this answer, it has become politicized, of course. So let's just remember that, but let's attend to our audience here. So let's have another discussion about that, how politicization gets into all this. So let me quote some others, because it's really, you have Rwandan, you have in fellow other groups, we have Ukrainian here, and they're all members of our working groups in the center. So I would like them to have a say as well. We do have here an anonymous attendee. I'm sure the anonymous is a mistake, but I don't know exactly who it is. I think it's a he. Thank you, Menachem, for your deeply personal commentary. I too was born in the Bergen-Belsen DP camp to parents who were sole survivors of their respective Polish families. They spoke very little of their experience, and I only imagine the horrors that they described, that were described today. Personally, I feel strongly traditionally Jewish, but while I never had a belief in God, I would feel guilty out of respect for my parents for not being, quotes, Jewish, quotes. I'm troubled in being able to reconcile these thoughts.
Well,
go ahead,
look, we are
Menachem.
we're on the same wavelength. I would love to be able to communicate with you directly, and if you send Yael your contact information, she'll pass it on to me. I would very much like to be in direct communication with you offline, because I understand exactly what you're saying. Look, for children of survivors, grandchildren of survivors, our existence is in many ways a defiant act by the survivors. Because in reality, what they could have done, what they might have been expected to do, is to just retreat into themselves. They had suffered, they certainly had lost, for the most part, faith in their fellow human beings. Of course, there are exceptions. The exceptions are, there are people who were saved by a neighbor, by a friend, by an Oskar Schindler. But for the most part, they came out of the experience shattered. And yet, rather than doing that, they almost immediately look toward the future. They almost immediately try to find friends and relatives, met others. In the displaced persons camp, during the couple of years after the war, marriages were exploding. They had the highest birth rate, Jewish birth rate anywhere in the world. Thousands upon thousands of children were born, and that was an act of defiance. I don't want to say that it is an answer, and I don't want to say that it is a victory, but it is a conscious desire to look forward and not backward, but to look forward for the overwhelming majority of the survivors with the full knowledge of what had happened to them. This was not moving forward in a vacuum, and that was not moving forward without remembering.
Thank you, Mark Weiss, for acknowledging that you are not anonymous. We will send you email to Menachem Rosensaft. And thank you for your question. In my own writings, I wrote that actually having children was a miracle, was giving humanity another chance. Think about it. But also because my father's name is Chaim, and we say L'chaim, every time we raise a glass, I think it's a good idea to remember that life is a core Jewish value. But let me keep going. After Erica Rao, also Timber Wolf wrote, "Amazing, thank you for sharing with us. I'm a writer and have written about intergenerational Jewish trauma. I am so intrigued by Menachem's craft in something as succinct as a poem. How beautiful."
Thank you.
Thank you. And let me interfere here, and I interfere. Let me remind everyone that the centers, the ICMGLT library is dedicated for multi-dimensional, multidisciplinarity, multi-group publications of any kind. And all of you who are writers, if we don't have your work already in the library, please write me, contact us, send us the materials. So it is. We are, in fact, within a month or two, we will have a physical library in New York City, not only a digital library that we have now. So it's really very important that you include that we embrace all of the work that is done. Erica, I think you already asked Galina from Ukraine writes to you. Thank you so much for your sharing the story and your perspective. If we don't process it, the history will repeat itself over and over. Yeah, thank you, Galina. And then we have Louis Henry Mars writing, "Thank you for sharing your story, Menachem. It has moved me deeply. As a follower of Christ, I consider myself a spiritual cousin of the Jews, but I'm also a descendant of kidnapped Africans sent into slavery in the Caribbean. For me, our trauma parallels the trauma of the Jews. Remembering is essential, but how do we heal from this kind of trauma is my personal quest. Is there healing possible? And what does it look like?" Manny, please take it on, and I will add my own comments too. Go ahead, Manny.
In many ways, healing is the wrong term. Because healing, you get over a broken leg, you get over the flu, you heal from it, and then it is something in the past. You don't remember the pain that you had at that time because the medicine worked, or or the operation worked, or the bone was came back together again, and the fracture was taken care of, and you don't have it in the back of your mind. The kind of suffering that you talk about of your ancestors, or of people in Rwanda, or of the victim in Srebrenica, or in Darfur today, or in Myanmar, that is not going to go away. One has to simply, but it will at some point, maybe the pain gets less and it becomes a different type of pain. And maybe it can even become a healing pain, a pain that you think about and that becomes a force for good. There was something that I skipped over it because in the interest of time, and now I'm sort of sorry I did, but it may be a good time, because when we talk about the Holocaust, when we talk about this kind of suffering, there are anachronisms. There are strange elements. So I'd spoken about my mother. Let me talk briefly about my father. Toward the end of 1943, my father was transferred from Birkenau to a subcamp of Auschwitz, Lagisza, near his hometown of Będzin. It is in southern Poland. Sometime the spring of 1944, he managed to escape from there and was hidden for some weeks by a Polish friend. His freedom was short-lived. On his way to try to get forged papers to enable him to get to Hungary, he was recaptured by German soldiers looking for someone else. He was first taken back to Lagisza, where he was severely beaten, and then returned to Auschwitz, where he was tortured and beaten continuously for months in Block 11, commonly referred to as a death block. The Germans wanted to know the name of the Pole who had hidden him, something my father stubbornly refused to do, and that's a stubbornness that I'm certain saved his life. For the remainder of the war, through several other camps, my father was forced to wear a uniform with a special red circle, the so-called Fluchtpunkt, identifying him as an escapee. At one point, Jakub Kojalczyk, the capo in Block 11, publicly gave my father 250 vicious lashes at the direction and under the supervision of an SS doctor. In late September 1944, September 26 to be exact, the same Kojalczyk wanted my father to conduct the Yom Kippur service. Emaciated, starved, my father chanted Kol Nidre from memory in the death block of Auschwitz, and then led the prayers there that evening and the following day for his fellow prisoners. As a reward, Kojalczyk gave my father and the other inmates of Block 11 an extra bowl of soup to break the fast. It is surreal to imagine Block 11 transformed, if only for 24 hours, into a sanctuary where Jews condemned to die prayed while the gas chambers of nearby Birkenau still function in full force. And I have always wondered, I've always had this thought, whether Adonai himself was praying alongside my father throughout that Yom Kippur in 1944. I tell this story only because it is one of so many others. It is one of episodes that are not explainable. They are not graspable. And yet they form part of it. And we can't be selective in what we remember and what we choose not to remember. Because if we eliminate parts of it, well, then we are doing a disservice to history, and we are distorting history. History is it's the good, the bad, the evil, the miraculous, the unexplainable. And in our dialogue, to come back in our dialogue with God, we have to be very careful. You will note at no point do I suggest or accuse God of responsibility for what happened. That was a responsibility of the perpetrators. That is a non-transferable guilt of those who committed the crimes. Crimes are not inherited, neither is goodness. But we can question, where were you? And we can ask, why was nothing done? And we can ask, well, shouldn't that, as David Weiss Halivni did, force us to re-examine what we're doing? And that, I think, is an important part of what we need to do going forward.
I promised Louis Henry Mars to add that the psychologist's point of view to the answer, and to let everyone know, actually, we do have working groups of different victim populations, such as the Haiti working group, the Rwanda working group, the Yazidi working group, etc. And Louis Henry, because you're asking as a Caribbean, please do write me, and perhaps you'll find your place with the Haiti working group. We ask, this is what the groups do. They ask, they share knowledge, they share feelings, etc. So and that could help anyone here who has that question as well. And really, I already read your question, if that's okay with you. And from Rwanda, Jacqueline, are you here? Are you able to speak, or should I read your question? She sometimes writes rather than speak because she's. So let me read. Thank you so much for sharing, and I look forward to reading the book. I myself have struggled with the same questions as a survivor of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, and I know these are questions that many survivors struggle with. I'm not sure we will ever have satisfying answers while on this earth, but we must never stop asking these questions, as the asking is perhaps as important as the answers. I'm not able to get on camera. Okay, so you told me indeed. And thank you. So she can't talk now, but I want to at least thank you from here. Blessings to you always. Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm very happy, Menachem, that you could at least hear her writing.
I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to you. I'm very grateful to Louis Henri Mal. Look, we have to understand that we must identify with one another as the descendants or survivors of genocide, of cataclysms. We have to understand each other's pain, and we have to be able to support one another. And that involves not necessarily having answers, but it does require us, all of us, to hear the questions, to listen to the questions, to understand the thought process and the emotions behind the question, because that the answer may, there's the idea that an answer to a question may not answer that question, but it may be the answer to a different question altogether that somebody may not even have thought of asking yet. And I think this is where we are today. We are 81 years after the Holocaust, after the Shoah. We are at a point where we have to figure out what do we do with that legacy? And we can either use it, as I mentioned before, as a sword against others, or we can try to use it as a way to bring people together. And clearly, I am hoping that my poems, my burning psalms, are in the second category.
And our center does exactly that. We bring people from all over the world to actually, as you see today, help each other, right? Talk with each other. So even as minority groups, which we all are, we really, in my dream, will form a significant minority. So we'll keep on and on. Let me read three more, at least four more that we can't leave without doing that. But let me just say that Mark Weiss and you, Manny, met at Bergen-Belsen.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay, good.
I remember Mark. I was as soon as you said the name, I'm
super. I'm so
yes.
happy about it. So here is a reunion. Good.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Judy Schreier and then two Israelis. So Judy Schreier, Lana's mother. This is Judy Schreier, Lana's mom. Menachem, wow, you're an incredible speaker and storyteller. You're also a great writer, too. I'm honored to have been invited to this discussion. So many questions you raised are ones that I, a child of two survivors, have asked for as long as I learned of the horrors. I'm not sure if there are really any real answers, especially with what has happened in recent timeline. Yes, we haven't touched on, we mentioned October 7, we have not touched on the scary revival of anti-Semitism that arose after October 7, but let's have another webinar on that, please.
I would,
Please,
that's exactly.
we'll have another date because that's, but we have, and Kali Klein, thanks you for your eloquence and sharing faith and remembrance. Okay, three more. Barbara, I just read Helena Birnbaum's memoir, Hope is the Last to Die, Coming of Age Under Nazi Terror. In June 1986, just before a visit to Treblinka, where many of her family members were murdered, she wrote, "How many answers will I find there? I will not light candles, nor will I pray. I will not run away from the memories, from the stories, from reading them or writing about them. I will not release myself from the obligations by lighting a candle or mumbling a prayer. I will not flee to God, who in this inferno revealed once and for all his non-existence in such a decisive and unequivocal way. Thank you, Menachem, for your eloquence, insightfulness, and willingness to bring these important questions to the forefront." We see here the distinction about not believing, believing that you don't believe in God, and being angry and taking him on. Which is extremely interesting. Menachem, you want to add to that?
Look, the experience of the Holocaust belongs entirely to those who went through it, the dead and the survivors. And whether it's Helena Birnbaum or anyone else, no one had the right to question or to argue with how they dealt with it. And we, in the next generations, are in a very similar boat, in a similar situation, except we do not have the privileges of the survivors. What we have is the obligation to carry it forward and to grapple with the questions. There is no answer. The person who came out, there were believers who came out of the Holocaust as non-believers. There were non-believers who came out of the Holocaust as believers. There are people who ask questions. There are people who don't want to hear the questions. Each of us, we must find our own direction. I'm working now on a book, which I hope will be done in the next year or two, dealing with
we will launch it at our physical library.
It will be my pleasure. But in dealing with basically how has the Holocaust been dealt with in Jewish thought? And it has been by people ranging from God is dead to the extremists blaming others for what happened. And we have to know nobody has the answer, because let's face it, nobody literally has any idea of what the countenance of God really is. We don't know. And it is presumptuous for us to believe that we know. As I was once taught when I was right after my bar mitzvah, by Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionism.
Uh-huh.
The story is it's a longer story, but the end result was, he said, it's not that God created man in God's image. It's that man created God in man's image.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the somewhat, if I can have a little bit of mild humor injected into today's discussion, the most iconic depiction of God in any kind of art that we know of is on the ceiling of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel in Rome, as the creation of the world. And you have a God depicted as a elderly white man with a long gray beard reaching out his hand to create Adam. And my perhaps sacrilegious question has always been, if God is all-powerful, why on earth would he want to depict himself as an old Jew? We don't know what the mystery of God, and therefore we have to grapple with how we want to interact with a divine presence whose countenance we do not begin to understand. And that's a mystery. And by the way, the only reason I think it's important for us it was important for me to write the Psalms was that we could, after the Holocaust, have written a brand new liturgy. We could have basically said, well, let's start anew. We didn't. And we also know that Jewish liturgy has not been static over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the 7th or 8th century of the Common Era, someone somewhere wrote a poem called Nidre, which was integrated into our liturgy. Similarly, there were people in Tzvat, Kabbalists in Tzvat, who wrote after the expulsion from Spain, and prayers were included. That's where Yedid Nefesh came from. In September of 1948, the then Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel, this was while the War of Independence was raging in Israel, the then chief rabbi Yitzhak Halevi Herzog, the grandfather of the president of Israel, wrote a prayer for the protection of this new state of Israel and the army of the state of Israel. Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father who art in heaven. That he gave that prayer to his close friend and not yet Nobel laureate Shai Agnon to edit. And this prayer has now become a permanent staple of every Shabbat service, holiday service, festival service. We need to do the same with respect to the Holocaust because it has to be part of our consciousness. We have to know, people have to know that it's there and not just having it relegated to a service for those who may or may not want to come to it.
Mm-hmm. I told you we'd go on, so you're not surprised, and I'm totally not surprised. But we performed, so until now we were talking about man's relationship with God, but I can happily share with you that indeed Louis Henry is Haitian, so you found our group. So please, Louis Henry, please write me. Write me as soon as possible. I will write my email in the chat. Okay, and moving further with people, I told you there are two major questions from Israel. Rani Dunitz, he has a whole big other story for the anti-Semitism issue, but not now. Thank you, Menachem, for all you have been doing for years. As a second generation myself, and as one who has done much work around documentation and reflection on the Shoah, including my own father and aunt's stories, I'm troubled by what awaits us once the last survivor will not be among us. As we move farther and farther away from the Holocaust, growing distortion, quotes, loss of memory and trivialization, what does it mean exactly to remember the Holocaust? Do we really know what we want to be remembered as the years pass and the world's memory become blurred and even manipulated? That's a whole other webinar too, but you have take it on, Menachem.
Well, it is for another topic altogether. But look,
okay,
we do
Rani, go ahead.
No, we do. Look, we have to be conscious, at the very least, that we have to preserve authentic memory And we have to make sure that when it is distorted, that we call the people who are doing it. We can't prevent people from from distorting it or from exploiting it. But we have to at least be on guard and expose them. A few, I guess it was a couple of months ago, 2 months ago, I think in November, the US ambassador to Poland delivered a speech at an event in which he basically said that any accusation of Polish involvement in the perpetration of the Holocaust is a lie. Well, that is a lie because, yes, there were thousands of Polish Christians who rescued and helped Jews. There were also thousands of Polish Christians who did the opposite in one form or another.
Mm-hmm.
And what history requires, what we have to be on guard on, is that neither side of that debate or any debate can distort what happened. If we remember the Oskar Schindlers and others who the righteous among the nation, it is in large part to emphasize how few there were. That had there been more of them, more people would have been saved. Had there been more courage by countries to open up their gates to refugees prior to 1942, we don't know how many might have escaped. All of it is part of the reality. And certainly, as time goes by, what we must do is to make sure, look, we can't control what will happen in 100 years. All we can do is to control what we pass on to the present and immediate next generations, and hope that what we pass on will be a catalyst to continue. And anything dealing with distortion of the Holocaust, denial, distortion, is also topic for a different webinar, as is, as you mentioned, Yael, any discussion of Gaza and what is happening, what has happening is happening there, which deserve, look, any time that people are suffering, they absolutely deserve the dignity of having their pain recognized.
Yes, indeed. And we do have Almasa Salihovic from Bosnia, indeed, right. And Almasa, please be in touch with me because we are planning the July 12 webinar for BIH, for Bosnia-Herzegovina, okay? But Almasa is writing to you, Menachem.
Yes.
Dear Menachem, thank you so much for all you have been doing for educating and helping the rest of us deal with the memorization and speaking, reminding people and emphasizing the importance of remembering the Holocaust victims and victims of other genocide. Thank you so much. I'm honored to have met you and to have had the opportunity, to have you at the Srebrenica Memorial Center. Honored to be able to call you not just someone to look up to, but as a friend. Warm regards from the bottom of my heart. Wonderful.
Well, thank you, Alma. Almasa is doing tremendous work to preserve the memory of the Srebrenica genocide.
Yes.
And I am honored that she is on this webinar, and I look forward to continuing our friendship.
Wonderful. In Almasa, I was at the opening of the memorial, actually, and in several years. So it would be really wonderful, July 12th, to start planning it now. So and for everyone, this is our 78th webinar. Please, we have webinars on all these all the places and issues, and we plan more and more and more. So please, those of you, you will receive the recording, but go to the other webinars. They're really amazing too. Let me thank you. And this is for all of you. I'm inviting all of you to come up with the ideas and with what matters to you. And you don't need to go to the Bible for it. Go to your heart, okay? Go to your own home. Find what you want us to work on. And we have two kinds of webinars. One that goes into depth about one group pain, and another is, international of different groups. So please, we are always open to suggestion and more and more and more. Okay. Louis Henry, okay, thanks for your email. Let me, just a second. There is a friend of yours. Before we go to your friend, Menachem, because he wants you to go visit him. Eran Shmueli sounds very Israeli to me. Professor Rosensaft, as Holocaust survivors become fewer, I think it's quite similar to Ronnie Dunitz, also doctor. Yeah. It seems increasingly difficult to keep their lived memories at the core of communal life. Okay, so actually Iran is asking from a different...
No, but look, Iran is...
Wait. He said, yet the Exodus, regardless of its historical contours, became central to Jewish liturgy and identity only generations later. In that light, is the passage of time primarily a danger to Holocaust memory, or could it be a necessary condition for the kind of deep incorporation into Jewish life that we seek? Yeah, that's in that webinar, other webinar. But go ahead, Menachem.
Look, Iran really raises the important issue.
Mm-hmm.
It is up to us, and it is up to us to at least move the process forward, because the Holocaust can become an integral part of our consciousness. We can make sure that it becomes in the category of the Exodus, in the category of a watershed event that has to be dealt with, that has to be part of the consciousness of future generations. Or it can be relegated as yet another pogrom, destruction, expulsion, inquisition, something in this, the long litany of what people basically talk about when they sit on the ground on Tisha B'Av, and they sort of recite it and are waiting until the day's over so they can stop thinking about it. So it's up to us. It's up to us, and we have to decide where it is and how it is dealt with, and if it is dealt with in a non-political, moral sense, that we can make it part of what we leave behind for future generations, which I think is probably a good way to end the discussion today.
Two more, and forgive me, all of those I did not directly read or interacted with. We are way over time, but that doesn't matter. We'll continue with other webinars. The best webinars like this one give birth to many other webinars. That's the idea. Okay, John German, a very avid attendee of ours, says the Zoom has no visible way to copy that's more technical. Rabbi, you please note to answer John. Please send the link to it because he wants to quote from your speech. John, you will also have the recording, don't forget. But Rabbi, take care of the technical issue. And I have to go to your friend, Michael Brenner. He's been very patient. So, Michael, do you want to go on? Do you want to speak? I will read because, okay. So Michael says, to Menachem, my friend and brother in heart, I still cry when I read from poems Bergen-Belsen. So do I, by the way. Me, as I listen to you. And now you write more, tears to my eyes. Beautifully said. And Michael says, adds, Menachem, when will I see you at PAS? What's PAS?
Park Avenue Synagogue.
Oh, yes, of course. It's in the neighborhood. Okay. Sign my book and l'chaim to you.
Definitely very soon.
Okay. And Michael, if your book is relevant to the center, please make sure to bring it here, to share it with us. And last but not least, Judy Ronay, to everyone, is saying there is a reunion of descendants of Penning, a subcamp of Buchenwald in Buda this spring. Or Budapest, she meant. Right?
No, Buda in Germany.
Buda, no. She's doing the Buda in that thing. Right, this spring. I'm planning to go in memory of my mom, whom I knew too, and to complete a book I've been working on. That's wonderful news with Judy. And we will launch that too. So everyone who is connected to Buchenwald, please, you write me, I will write Judy, and you can get all the information if you want.
So the reunion will be in Budapest. Or at least
That's why I said Budapest, right?
Right.
So thank you. Thank you for checking. So Judy, make sure to send me the information so anybody who asks will get the answer. Menachem, we went over and over and over. Of course, what can we do? And Erica Rao has more, but please, Erica.
Let's leave it for next
you
time.
are totally involved. Please write me personally so we can plan a webinar for all the questions.
Perfect. I'll be happy to.
And thank you for everybody who stayed with us all this time. Menachem, I told you we never finish on time, but you really took it 1/4 of the time over.
Well, thank you.
Totally unsurprising.
Thank you very much for having me, and look forward to continuing our conversation in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. And we must continue, right? So
be well to everybody, and stay safe, everybody.
Yes, stay safe. Thank you, Menachem. Take care.
Bye.